What's up, Pleasant Valley? I am so pumped to introduce you to one of my favorite human beings, David Fraze, who it's so you're a doctor. You're Dr. David Fraze.
I want you to speak to me with such tones.
Yeah, actually, I was at Fuller with you when we looked at your dissertation. Remember when we were going to speak at that thing in Bakersfield?
Yeah, so it's official. You've seen it and you've
That's
held it
true.
with your own hands.
I'm like Thomas, unbelieving Thomas. I just could not believe that you
And
are a
that was a great
doctor.
trip, by the way. I don't know why somebody would pay us to be in the same space for that long.
But they've done it multiple times. Like
They did.
we have tricked people many times into thinking that we would be a good addition to their youth rally or whatever.
Oh my word. And
I've probably
for the record, you're one of my favorite human beings too. Can I just say that?
Yes. Let me just get that on a loop going.
Please.
I have co-preached with you. You and Randy Harris are the two people I've co-preached with the most. And it's always fun. So, Brother David, we worked together at the Hills for a while. You were the director of student ministries, and our lives have overlapped in lots of ways. And one of the most powerful ways we've overlapped is you're kind of like one of the church outreach people for Fuller. You worked at the Hills. Now you work at Lubbock Christian University doing some head honcho job. What is that? What it says on your business card?
Yes.
Fraze head honcho.
As a matter of fact, it says head honcho or elf in,
Impersonation. Yeah. Will Ferrell look-alike, all these things. I have seen Brother David give announcements in elf spandex to a church audience.
I cannot deny it. This last year, we had elf extravaganza for our Big Blue Christmas, and I helped the news. So actually, I did the news as Buddy the Elf.
What a gift. What a gift.
That's a spiritual gift.
The Lord disperses his gifts among the body in so many ways. And so, Brother David works for LCU, but you also have this kind of gig with Fuller where you help with this initiative that Pleasant Valley has been a part of for the last 18 months called Growing Young. And there's a book that it circulated our church. A lot of people have heard about it. And because one of our huge initiatives, we have 3 initiatives, Brother David: evangelism, racial reconciliation, and generational generosity.
Mm-hmm.
When I was interviewing with the elders, because I'd seen this put into action at both Highland and the Hills in very different ways. I mean, it's not a controversial thing, but it does force you to have conversations intergenerationally, which sometimes lead to controversial topics being raised. But I guess the first question, if I was just an outsider listening or somebody at PV who's not familiar with Growing Young, are you saying get rid of the old people?
No, or I would be gone. So let me back into that question, because I think the history of it's very important. The first summer, this is actually when we met in person, when I first started working at the Hills, I'd already scheduled a research fellowship with Fuller where I got my doctorate. And if you remember, I spent that whole summer there. And
I do.
I actually researched and more in depth Deuteronomy 6 and its relationship to how we do youth ministry. At that time, I'd been doing youth ministry for over 20 years. And, programmatically, I mean, that's kind of what I've always done. So I have this gift to put a foot in adult world and kid world and pull them together. And I didn't really have that word, though, cemented into my vocabulary, and that's that word intergenerational. I'd always used adults. That's the way that I was blessed growing up. And I think if I could really fast for our audience, if you think about all of the lessons that we've ever heard, except this one, okay, and think about all the camps, all the gospel meetings, all the vacation Bible schools, mission trips. If you could come up with a number of the formative experiences you've had, and then compare it to this next question: how many adults have impacted your spiritual life? Automatically, we think of names and faces of adults. I mean, we know this to be true, because good programming just puts adults together. So that's that intergenerational. Deuteronomy chapter 6, the hero Israel verse, the big Shema. It wasn't written to mom and dad. It was written to the community. So you and I have talked about this. We are a product of the adults that have patted us on the back and said, Jonathan, Dave, you can do this, and we need you in the body of Christ. And so that's intergenerational. And I think what we've done and what we went to research years ago is we've created what a guy named Stuart Bond Cummings said is a one-eared Mickey Mouse. We have adult church, and then we have this one ear over here called student ministry, children's ministry, college ministry, and it's an other thing. And you're involved in this until you get married, have babies, and then you can be part of the big church.
And that's a huge if, right?
Yes.
Because so many, I mean, what was the research that over half of our students graduate church when they graduate high school?
That is the best numbers we have right now. And actually, I have another research project here that we were involved with, a group of us, probably, I think about 20 youth ministry educators and practitioners across the country. I was the token CFC guy, Christian church guy. We all come together, and the brand new research says, yes, still 50%, but 1 million people will walk away from faith, just walk away. And so those things are alarming, and it's actually spurring some more practical things that I think are going to be unloaded from Fuller Seminary across denominational faith tribe lines to say, hey, we got to get our kids back re-engaged with faith. But I'm bringing that one moment up because we came up with a thing called sticky faith, where we looked at what does a student who made the 50%, what do they have, right? So it was all about looking at youth ministry different. Let's pack that boat of that student. It was heavily relational with adult relationships. You experienced a lot of the way we did youth ministry at the Hills was exactly that. Now, growing young, this is the next phase, if you will, which our church that we were part of was a part of the research. But what we did is we went back to look at those sticky churches and thought, okay, how are they doing as a church between the ages of 15 to 29-year-olds? How are they doing with that? And because it's so easy to look at that 50% fall off, Jonathan, to say, man, it's awful, and just batten down the hatches and we're all dying. And there is no major church growing in the United States as far as mainline denominations. But we found churches in this Growing Young study, which it's the largest study demographically, ethnically. It was an incredible broad scope of churches. We found churches that were doing things that were growing younger. And growing younger doesn't mean they just got a bunch of young people in there, but they're actually growing numerically. That's what we mean about growing young. They're experiencing growth in a time where the church seems to be imploding upon itself. These churches are showing life. So that's the growing young part.
So there are in this thing, there are 6 core values that are that y'all talk about that are, I in my experience, spot on, and in helping intergenerational stuff and retention with young adults. Do you want to talk about the first one's unlocking keychain leadership?
And those are huge. And I will say, and I totally agree with you, for the most part, it doesn't have to do with being a liberal or conservative church. It doesn't have to do with having a praise team, no praise team, instrumental music, all those things. It is something that any church can do. Now, it may involve some of these conversations.
So I really appreciate you going there, because one of the things we sent a team of our people to Pasadena, California, to Fuller to go through this. and we had already decided to transition. We want to stay a cappella, but they want to make a cappella as great as possible for multi-generational.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some pushback, because in really the state of Arkansas, it's been mostly one man standing up and doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's what I had seen. When I would talk to college students who grew up at this church, and I would ask them, what do you think about church? They loved the people, but I was hearing things like, every few weeks I need to go to New Life, which is kind of a non-denominational, Bible church. It's a good church, but they would need to go there because it wasn't their heart language at all. But then I would say, well, you need to tell your mom and your parents and grandparents about that. They didn't want to do that because they felt like they were hurting their feelings. And I think part of that's maybe Bible Belt culture. So we were like, what we were trying to do with the worship team was have what we were thinking of as a compromise. And when we went to Growing Young, we had already announced we were doing this, and they said, man, one of the people said I wouldn't do it because worship, the assembly time is the great ceasefire of, but I thought, man, that I don't think they know how deep the generational divide is here. Like, this is the compromise for young adults.
I was actually at the table when that was going on and hearing the discussion, and I love to see my PV family. So this is cool to be able to have the opportunity to visit with you and unpack that a little bit more, because the answer is both and. In our fellowship, that discussion of how we do worship does become kind of an intergenerational type of deal in relatability. There are things that I did growing up, and I'll just be honest, transparent. There's some things that I really love about new worship type stuff. Other things I'm like going, okay, I don't want to do any more dancing, hand clapping, spinning around in the aisle. Can we just sing a song? You know, you don't have to.
We don't have the rhythm to.
Oh, we're awful. We're awful. Let's leave clapping time. You know, coming from the hills, there were times I walked in one time to our youth center, Jonathan, and there was so much smoke, I thought the fire department would show up. And I'm like, guys, the lights and smoke are great, but I can't even see the Bible. So, you know, there's, and I'll say this because it actually is one of the key components. And one of the key components is warm relationships.
Yeah. Warm is the new cool.
Yeah, let's go around. I'll just quickly say the 6. Keychain leadership says that I'm not only going to listen to you, but I'm going to help you lead. In other words, I'll guarantee you there were times that you and I got to do the devotional on Wednesday night. It was probably one of the first times we ever got to speak.
Yeah.
I think what we've had a tendency to do, though, and it's funny that the research has just come back. I finished a research project with Fuller on Churches of Christ and our relationship with these 6 competencies. We're exactly like the mainline churches as far as where we're hot and where we're cold. This is one of those areas that we're very cold in, is keychain leadership, is that our students, and again, these are people that are students who answered these questionnaires and the assessment, also all the way to people our age to older, is they've learned a lot of skills, but they haven't really got to use them in services. So go with me here for a second. Forever, one of the things that we've done in Churches of Christ, mainline Churches of Christ, are things like leadership training for Christ. And we have taught them how to do puppets. We've taught them how to sing in small groups. We've taught them how to sing in choruses. We've taught them how to read scripture creatively. We've done all of these things. But yet when they get old enough, we tell them, you can't do that in worship. And we imply because it's wrong. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. leadership training for Christ, we're training them with skills that they never can use in our main assemblies. That's a problem.
One of the things I've said is sometimes churches get too big for their britches.
Mm-hmm.
I would not be a minister today if I didn't have opportunities to speak or lead a song when I was like 10 and 11. And I think I think it's in here that excellence is the death grip of warmth.
Absolutely.
And
because,
so to not have like young adults participate in stuff, the argument is like maybe it would lower the bar of excellence. But the reason I love the church today is because a Down syndrome little boy, or he was 4 years older than me, but he was Down syndrome, and he led singing every time. And to this day, it's the best worship in my experience I've ever had. And I've been in the same smoking lights stuff that you have too.
Well, and I work with youth specialties as well, and we just posted a blog about worship that I would encourage everybody to go to youthspecialties.com, look at that blog on worship, because it's the same conclusions. And anytime you have people coming from different areas with the same conclusions, there's something to it. And that quest for excellence. So we can't have our young men or young ladies doing anything. And I know I just opened a can of worms, that you're ruining an opportunity for key chain leadership. And what leadership is not this. Let me go to the negative. It's not that you just have a youth night every year where the youth take over the service. You start just letting them get involved. So go back to some of the stuff that we did together at the Hills. I don't know if you remember this, but it's very intentional. We did not highlight youth missions. We highlighted missions.
Yeah, that's right.
We didn't have all the young people come on stage and applaud them that were going on mission trips. Their names were mentioned with everybody else's. When a student led in worship, okay, when they led in worship.
Go ahead, Mr. Popular.
Oh my gosh, it's a big deal. When
they started to get on committee teams and serving in.
Nobody applauded. And so
it became part of the life of the church. Yeah. One of the things that I think unlocking key chain leadership, and by the way, we've been working on this. Like we've had more young men do stuff in our assembly, and on Wednesday nights, young women do stuff as well. But also, and this is where I think the bigger things happen with unlocking key chain leadership, putting them in rooms with decision-making power. Like they're not elders, but they're also not nothing. Like they get some say in where a budget for a ministry go or what ministry efforts we do, and you start treating them like, hey, you can vote, you can sign up for the military, you can, or you have a driver's license. You know what I mean? Like you start treating them like they're the integral part of the church of Jesus that they are.
Well, if they are baptized believers, and this is where we went, and I think it's true in the last 2 or 3 ministry contexts I've been in, is if they qualify and they want to be involved and they want to go through the process, they should be able to be involved. Now, we're not talking about people who have no wisdom calling all the shots, but they are part of the body, and they will ask questions that we won't ask.
Right.
And they'll tell us what they're thinking, and that will help. So, I mean, that gives them buy-in. They're not just, they're not just going there. They're a part of life there. And that's a huge deal.
So the next one is empathize with today's young people. And okay, let me just play what the responses I've heard back tend to be like, well, I do. I mean, I know what it was like when I was young. But one of the challenges is we don't know what it's like. We've never been young in this age.
Yes.
And it is, I mean, antidepressants, anti-anxiety, digital screen addiction, not just of the teens, but also of their parents. isolation, the pressure for sexting, and those kinds of, I mean, nobody who is my age or older knows what it's like to be young today.
Oh, that's true. And you know what took us 5 years? What begins in the body ends in culture. So when our bodies begin to change, culture gets to determine when we get to enjoy adult relationships. And so what's happened is that's expanded. When I went through school, when you're 13 and when you're 18, you left. I could go to the military, I could go to the workforce, I could go to college.
Yeah.
But my relationship, I wasn't coming home, not in the same way that I did before. Then that's kind of lengthened as culture said, well, a high school diploma is not enough. We got to get a college education. My parents, probably like yours, thought their job was over when I went to college. Today, the parents right there where you go to church in Pleasant Valley, they think their job's not over till their kid graduates college. And if their kids don't go to college, they feel like, what did I do wrong? So culture determines. I mean, it's a much different adolescent journey by the numbers, but also sports has changed. Academics have changed. Fine arts have changed. The pressure on kids today is different. And so when you look at all those changes, you're absolutely right. We're not even talking about the cell phone and technology yet, which this generation we're a part of now is named after that. It was coined by a lady named Twingie who said, this is iGen.
Yeah.
This generation has not known a world without the internet and without the smartphone. It is a much different world. We're not even talking about family structures. Things are so different.
Yeah.
So to empathize, we got to be really careful. Empathy is putting myself in the shoes of somebody else. And if a student lets us in and say, hey, Jonathan, tell me about what it was when you grew up. Dave, what's it like when you grew up? They'll hear those stories and be fine with it. But what we have a tendency to do as adults is say, well, I was your age once and here's what happened for me.
Kind of project our experience even when it's not similar to theirs.
Yeah, they've never been adults. And see, that's one of those deals. We've never been kids in 2020. They've never been adults in 2020. But we can look back and be adults. They've never been where we are before. And so we got to be empathetic.
And once we do that, we're able to offer some wisdom, but they have to know we can sit with them where we understand the world that they're living in.
Yeah.
So the next one is one that is really encouraging because we're the Church of Christ, Jesus. Yeah. So the next one is take Jesus's message seriously. And I do think this is a real strength in our fellowship of our healthier churches.
Yep.
Churches that emphasize Jesus more than, Church of Christ. That we really do take the Bible seriously. We take the gospel seriously. Tell me more about why that's so appealing to young adults.
Well, first of all, this is the green part of the assessment. We do really well with taking Jesus's message seriously, especially today. And man, we need to hear this and teach in general Bible. It's one of my favorite things to do. I have students that, here at LCU, we're 30% Church of Christ. Some probably about 60% somewhat religious. That leaves a lot that just come for the quality of education, quality of athletics. So I have an opportunity in that class to talk about what our message is. I get a hearing when I talk about Jesus.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So that is the hope of the world.
Yeah.
It's huge.
I think it's actually a real strength that we have. And then you mentioned fuel a warm community, or warm is the new cool. So here's the question I have for that. I think that in churches of Christ, generally speaking, this is another strength we have. We do the one another's really well. Like if you're a part of a church of Christ, you are a part of a community that will take care of each other in crisis times, except if you step out of bounds on whatever doctrinal issue. And then we do have a little bit of Amish will shun you. And I think that would be really hard for young adults who have a real heart for inclusion.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, this is in the research that I just completed. You're really the first one to hear this, which is funny, since we didn't have Pepperdine. So welcome. This is typically a yellow area for all churches, and as a whole, it's a kind of a yellow area for us too. It's not really strong, it's not really weak. But there's 3 areas that we're weaker than mainline denominations. One of them is making people feel accepted.
On the outside coming in?
Yeah. Another one is integrating newcomers well. We're actually redlined on that question. We don't integrate well, and then we don't make visitors feel welcome. Now, this is why those are so significant.
It's because of the wheel, right? That was my second question. Yep. The wheel about when you're so good at having warm relationships, you become, hold on, let me, yeah. So, warm relationships. Yeah. Warm relationships. So that, okay. PV, listen, this is my thing with a cappella music. A cappella music is one of the great strengths of Churches of Christ. Randy Hughes said today in the Bible study I was leading, the best argument for a cappella music is a cappella music at its best. And I think that's right. It's a great strength that we have, but it's hard for outsiders to come in because if they don't know the song, and so having a worship team is one of the ways that you help prioritize outsiders and integrating newcomers. This is not about worship team, praise team stuff, Brother David, but it is
it's about warmth, though.
Yeah,
absolutely,
it's about warmth.
Because it is so intimate, and I wish people could hear that. I love a cappella music. I get it, I love it, but I had a contest with one of my friends the other day. We pulled out an old Purple songbook, and I said, hey, whatever song, you just start singing the first line. I knew every single one, Jonathan. I had it down. Okay.
Yeah. So which is such a great strength that, I mean, you got disciples. You were raised in this. I mean, I know obscure songs.
Oh, there's an all-seeing eye watching you.
Watching
Jonathan.
you. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Here's why this is so important, though, because warmth is the new cool. And one of our strengths can become our weaknesses in that if we are so strong, like if you and I are always talking to each other, if I was at PV, I would find you. But the problem is now that I know, I'm going to talk to you somewhere else. I would not interrupt because I want people to have the opportunity to have the perception, at least, that you're accessible. But man, we got to hear this. PV, you got to hear it. One of the loneliest places at times is when you walk into a building and I don't stop talking to you to go say, hey, what's your name? I know this is more than just greeting visitors.
Yeah.
It's this
being open. It's being open to,
of we're around. And that's why some of the steps in Growing Young is to be so deliberate in creating community, stopping down during church. Hey, let's talk about this. Let's be involved with this. Yeah. And one of the ways that if you really want to get to know how warm you are is get a diverse group of church members to evaluate the warmth of the church. Now, what we have a tendency to do is to get class leaders. Don't go for that.
Yeah.
Find some individuals, maybe find some friends, ask them, your church leaders, come do, a secret guest at our church. Come be part of PV and tell us what you feel when you're among us.
We hired Unstuck to do the secret shopper, and they were gracious on a lot of stuff that they said PV was doing well, but they said your target audience is 45 to 55-year-old Church of Christ people.
Yeah.
And it was because they're honing in on, he said nobody said hi to him while he was there, those kind of things. And our people are good. They're warm and loving, and they're not exclusive. But part of it is, it's in the air, it's in the culture. You go to the people that, you have history with, and without realizing what's at stake.
Well, and this is part of the idea of warmth. I mean, honestly, when I go to church sometimes, because I serve at a local high school, And so there's times I just want to be around my people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that high school are my people, but when I go to church, it's almost like, hey, I just want to sit down with my family, the people that I know. But then I remember that it's a both and. I'm going to have time with those individuals, but I need to be sure to create a warm community, because in our culture, whether we like it or not, people still come to church to find something.
Yeah.
And the warmer we are, the better it is. And the churches that are growing younger take serious the feeling in that environment, the way that they talk about communion, the way that they talk about giving. They have, and you and I had experience in this, that we began to change our vocabulary so that someone who came for the very first time would understand these weird things that we're doing and why.
Yeah, because we have great reasons for doing them, but we have to explain. So, one of the reasons I care so much about this, Leslie's a first generation Christian. And so I remember it at Harding, she just kind of stumbles in, she gets baptized at the Mesquite Church of Christ, winds up deciding to come to Harding. I'm sitting next to her in like gospel meetings, and everybody's singing, but nobody's got a songbook out. They're not even bothering telling what song. So I'm having to say, I will call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from my enemy, because it's so, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I care about this person, and she's being made to feel while we worship God, like, this isn't for you. And so, it's just, we're not thinking about the outside.
And by the way, if I give you a book, chapter, and verse, when Paul outlines in Corinthians decency and an order, and boy, please hear this, PV and everybody else, it is not 1980s worship, which makes me laugh. Every generation goes back to the generation of their kids and calls that decency and an order.
That's funny. That's
I was actually preaching at a church that had the name and the board and the budget, one of those boards. I thought that was the coolest thing.
Attendance, yeah.
Oh, it was awesome. But remember what he says in there. He goes, if you don't have a word to say that's edifying to everybody, shut your mouth.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
I think the concept is there are people that warmth in and of itself maybe is explaining to our kids, Jonathan.
Yeah.
The older explaining to the younger, this is why we do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what's important. Let's all stop and greet those around you. Well, why do we do that? It's not just a time filler. One of the things we started doing at Monterey, where I attend now, in wanting to be a warmer community, and we started doing this during the pandemic, and now that we're back together, we still do it, is when we get through preaching, Barry will stop and say, hey, I want you to consider these 2 questions with the people around you.
Oh, that's good.
And some people just sit there.
Sure, yeah.
Other people are like going, we get to talk without responding, we're not confessing.
Yeah.
We don't have to pray. And there is a warmth that's beginning to take place. And a lot of it is, again, just thinking in our minds, how can we make this assembly warmer?
Yeah, I love it. Okay, the next thing is prioritizing young people and young families everywhere.
Yes.
Doesn't that mean not prioritizing seniors?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Basically, what that means is being intentionally intergenerational. Now, those are my words, that we understand that the young people are not just, like you said, just waiting to be part of the church of today. They are part of us. So, for instance, in the research that I did, values young people's presence in main gatherings. My friend Jake, who helped write the book you're holding in your hand, said, this is odd, Dave, because you're always telling us how in main worship, and it's true, the Church of Christ is known for having our young people in assemblies. It's very odd.
Yeah, you don't,
other movements.
Like, we don't have like children's church or.
Yes.
Yeah, right. It's one of our strengths, isn't it?
It's awesome.
Yeah.
But this is where that worship thing comes into mind. And why would we even want to entertain having a praise team or listening to our young people and trying to listen to their voice and their wishes for worship? We are actually almost a full point below the major denominational average on this, which is amazing to me, because the young people don't feel their presence in worship is actually acknowledged. And I think that is, in a lot of ways, if we carry out those key change suggestions and listen to our young people, right? If we look for the success metric.
And not unilaterally, right?
No,
You're not saying unilaterally. Yeah, like, together. But let them have a voice they're baptized believers. Let them have a voice in who we are as a church.
It is empathy and understanding. And boy, please hear me say this. I've said this a lot. The reason young people started leaving the church in our movement is not because we were not instrumental. Forever, when people started ushering in instruments, they're like, if we don't have instruments, our young people will leave the church. Well, guess what? They're still leaving.
Yeah.
It's not the instrument. It's this warmth deal. It's this prioritizing.
Yeah. They want to be one another.
So, yeah, exactly. So can they ask the difficult questions? Can they talk about things? Can they say, so for instance, and I say this a lot, but let me just say this out there, okay? The number one need of a student is not to understand that God created the human race and defeat evolution. Their questions are things like, what do I do about my friends who are same-sex attracted?
Yeah.
Do you see that now?
Oh, yeah, sure.
They just
the pressure points are different today so much than they were in the 70s or, whatever.
But when we give them the freedom to express and explore doubt and to empathize and express themselves and to come to a place of understanding and get involved in the mess, it actually increases our warmth, increases our prioritizing, because we're taking serious the act of discipling these kids, not to just make them good Church of Christers, but
not to coalesce to culture either. Not to say like, whatever you think is right is right. It is to disciple them, but you have to acknowledge the questions that they're actually asking.
Yeah, please hear that, because nobody's saying it, and they're not asking for it. They're like, they want wisdom, but they also want to be heard. They don't want to just be given, that's what we've always done. That's wrong. Explain to them why it's wrong.
So the last one is being a good neighbor. Yeah. That is a surprising one for a lot of people. Why does that matter for, like, what you just said about, if we don't bring in instruments, we're going to lose the next generation. It seems to me like everybody uses losing the next generation to do whatever their kind of like pet thing is. And what I'm interested in is the churches, like what Growing Young is talking about, the churches that are actually engaging the next generation. And this is one of those things, being a good neighbor. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Well, because it's authenticity. That's another big word. If warm is the new cool, authentic is what we're talking about here. And we actually, as a movement, we do pretty good here, because most of our churches, we have like a benevolent center. We do something of that nature. But I think this is even moving closer. Does our community outside of our walls look like the community inside our walls? Are we, do we look at our leadership structure, and do we see our leaders look like the people that are in our community? And always, please hear this, passion over people and over politics. Dude, I'm from Texas, you're from Arkansas. And there's a lot of people that have strong opinions, but we just have to understand that we have to have passion over people. And, it may have to do with race relations. It has to do with mask wearing, not wearing a mask, all these things. The way we handle it in our language is communicating something, not only to our children, but to our churches. Are we being good neighbors?
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good, especially as an election year rolls around in the middle of a pandemic. That, ask yourself before you get super fired up about whatever the latest hot button issue is it worth my grandkids' faith? Because you may not think it's related, but I'm telling you, I've had a lot of conversations with your grandkids, and one of the things they're noticing is what kind of faith, what your faith does to how you engage social issues and the people that you disagree with.
And I'll
Yeah.
say, I do, you didn't know this, it's kind of funny. I do a thing called That's Good Stuff on Channel 11 News on Sunday nights here in
Dressed like
Lubbock.
Buddy the Elf?
No, it's legit. Sometimes I'm like, hey, that's good stuff.
Oh, that is cool. Look at you.
Can
I
make
didn't know.
you can make fun of me, and that's
Are you
good
going to
stuff.
sign my Bible, or are you that big of a deal?
I don't know. I am a minor TV celebrity. Anyway, but here's something that's so true about civil discourse. We will be judged by our grandchildren on what's going to be happening over the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a lot more to do than just who's in the White House, who's not in the White House. We're talking about the discipling of our kids. How do we speak about people that we disagree with?
Yeah.
How do we speak about these things that, can you be on the opposite side of an issue and still have respect for one another? Because really it's hard. I don't know about you, but I've been hammered more for remaining in the middle of arguments than choosing a ditch on this dirt road we're in. But I think it's very hard to settle the bar ditches and stay on top of the road and try not to claim a party but a Christ. And that's hard because both parties are trying to manipulate the vote, and both parties are saying the same thing. They're saying, if you don't vote for me, this vote, and the DNC said it, then the RNC.
Yeah, that's right.
This is a vote for the soul of our country. Well, we're messed up on either side.
Tim Keller has this video that I just watched. I loved, on how to reach post-Christians. Manhattan pastor, very, very effective with reaching unchurched people. And he was asked about this, and he said, it seems to me that there are 4 Christian social positions that are relevant to America these days, that the Bible doesn't back down on any of them. 1, all races are created in the image of God equally and bear equal image difference. It's not like be colorblind. It's saying all ethnicities have equal dignity and must be treated accordingly. And the church must not back down from that, which means, things like racial equity and justice is stuff the church should care about. 2, that human life matters before birth and all the way to death, that we are pro-life for the unborn and for, we're pro-life consistently. 3, that the vulnerable, poor, and oppressed, the church should stand on their side and with them and offer care and support, and those things like immigration, that stuff. And then so people who are on the outsiders, always be vocal for the outsiders. And 4, sex is between a man and a woman in marriage, in a covenant marriage. And he says the reason that the reason we're so politically divided is because those 4 things, 2 of them go in one party and 2 of them go on the other. And he said in Manhattan, he felt tremendous pressure to play up 2 and kind of ignore the other 2. And he said a preacher in Alabama would feel tremendous pressure to play up a different 2 and play down the other 2. But all 4 are in the Bible equally. And so our kids know that. If they've been discipled or they know the Bible, they're looking at Matthew 25 and Jesus saying, whenever you fed me, whenever you clothed me, whenever you visit. But they hear us talk about pet issues and not the whole witness of the Bible, and it loses. But I'll tell you, I list the Catholics. I love their social they have been consistently all 4 of those things.
Yeah.
And so I listen to them. I think they know what they're talking about.
Well, I mean, you and I've said a lot of different things where if people camp out on one of them, they would think that, we're, heathens.
Yeah.
But, it is the being comfortable. And this is where I think being a good neighbor is for me personally. I'm very comfortable in the ambiguity.
Sure.
I really love
meeting people where they are.
I don't judge people in the world. I have judgments, but I judge those in the church. And we are really, really good about judging people outside in the world when it seems to be very, very clear in Scripture. You should judge me. I should judge you.
who am I to judge the world? And so it is the church that is supposed to be the people of Jesus, that we can't hold a standard. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Man, and I've heard people say over and over again saying, well, Jesus stand, with the oppressed against the oppressor. I would agree with that somewhat, but we have a tendency to define who the oppressor is, and that makes us pretty arrogant, because Jesus stood a Roman and a Jew,
right,
a Samaritan.
Yeah, yep, that's right. And the wealthy Zacchaeus and the poor, so anytime there's self-righteousness, Jesus is far from it. The word tradition just is a Latin word.
I'm sitting here talking to you while I'm sitting here getting ready for class.
Okay.
As we're talking.
The Latin word, the word tradition comes from the Latin word to trade from one generation to another. And my concern is we're not doing that well, because you can't trade what the other generation's not taking. So I really appreciate the work that you've done. Thanks for helping our fellowship get involved in Growing Young. And anyway, I really appreciate you, Brother David. I hope anything that we said that was heretical will,
it will.
Edited out.
I'm going to show you something that is so cool.
Okay.
Right now, about Lubbock Christian University Bible Department. Look what we have.
A popcorn machine. Whoa. All right, Eden, Samuel, you're going to Lubbock Christian.
We have a popcorn machine, and right now the temperature is like 40-something degrees, and the smell of popcorn.
Oh, nice.
Hey,
get in your office.
This is Donna.
Hey, Donna. God bless you as you work with.
Hey, I've already left, so you can't tell her that. Hey,
okay.
PV, I love you, and I appreciate you guys. I love spending time with your staff. You have a dream team. And can I just say something to y'all? Change is rough anytime you look at it, but I will say this: no one's changing anything just for change's sake. I've got to know the heart of your leaders. I've got to hear their conversations, and there are such exciting things happening at PV. So, man, it is for the right reason and right motivation. And I just want to say that, Jonathan, to your people. Y'all are doing a great job.
Thanks, Brother David.
And, man, when they got rid of booster, be a booster, don't be grouchy like a rooster, I thought I was going to leave the church, but I stayed. So things may look different, but it's for a great motivation.
Yeah. Hey, man, thanks so much. I can't wait for when this pandemic is over to have you in PV and have you do some stuff with our leadership and full church. So much love to you, Brother David.
Love you.
Yeah, love you too.
Death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name.